Welcome to Buffalo Pregame, your source for live Buffalo football discussion, news, analysis, opinions, and more. Presented by ASM Publications and Bills Digest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Buffalo Pregame. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, here for ASM Publications and Bills Digest. Obviously, a dark time in our country due to recent events, but as a great broadcaster once said, sports are the candy store. It's where we go to escape the harsh realities that we experience every day, and that's what we'll aim to do on tonight's episode. As I'm praying for the family that was impacted by today's events, and also praying every day that our country finds itself in a better place than it has been over the past several years. This is certainly a dark time, a disappointing and sad time in our country's history, and may we all begin to work together to solve the many issues that are trying to bring down our great way of life. But let's get to it on tonight's show. We discussed the latest crop of injuries that have besieged the Bills roster. But before that, some good news. Tre'Davious White is back. That kind of ignites a question at the cornerback position. What does that mean for rookie Dorian Strong? We'll discuss all of that along with other news and notes that have come in throughout the day. Also some news out of the Jets camp leading into this Week 2 matchup between the Bills and the Jets at MetLife Stadium Sunday, 1 p.m. As Josh Allen referenced earlier, the Bills haven't really been all that accustomed to Sunday 1 p.m. games in recent memory. So back to what used to be the norm for Bills fans and players alike, Sunday 1 p.m., where a lot of people are comfortable. I'm sure a lot of Bills fans are very pleased with that. But each week on Buffalo Pregame, I'll provide updates on the NFL, NHL, and more via daily articles, podcasts, videos, and more. Please subscribe to Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, along with Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on Substack, both of which are free of charge. Also, head on over to the YouTube app or wherever you're listening, hit that like button or give us a rating on the audio side. It would really mean a lot to the program as we're trying to spread the word, and we would appreciate it if you would spread the wealth in terms of a rating, a like, a subscription, a share, whatever it may be on the audio side or on the YouTube app. All right, let's get into it. We'll start with the return of Tre'Davious White. He hadn't practiced since August 21st with a groin injury. I made a mistake on social media earlier referencing it as a high ankle sprain. All these injuries for the Bills this season, it's hard to keep track, but nonetheless, that's my fault. Video from Sal Capaccio, Thad Brown, and many others showed White moving around pretty well during the individual portion of today's practice. Reporters not permitted to watch team drills, but there were some short-term bursts, some change of direction, and really going through that period of practice, not as much limited as Sean McDermott and the injury report said that he was on Wednesday. So certainly a good sign for Tre'Davious White, and it appears as if he's going to be set to play this Sunday against the New York Jets. He spoke with the media after practice, said that he was feeling pretty good. So barring a setback here with Tre'Davious White, I would imagine he's going to get the start this weekend. But the question now is, if he is back, do you put him right back into the starting lineup? It seems that based on Sean McDermott's comments before practice that will indeed be the case. But Dorian Strong played well in week 1. He didn't allow a reception, as we discussed previously, per next-gen stats. He did have that holding penalty called against him that was a bit questionable of a call. And he also chased down Derrick Henry down the sideline, as a clip has been surfacing on social media, and chopped the arm, did a nice job tackling him, maybe not as much in the open field, but along the sideline, and really using that to his advantage against the big-bodied running back. So there is some utility there with Dorian Strong, and I think he's shown well both in training camp and preseason, and now he's brought that into the first game in the regular season. But like I said, I think McDermott and company, I think they're set to give Tre White a well-earned chance at locking down this starting role. And I think that's the right choice. I'm not sure Dorian Strong performed in such a way where it left you saying, we can't take him off the field. We have to leave him out there as a starter come hell or high water. All the time you committed to Tre'Davious White during offseason and training camp, this was your plan entering the year. You were going to let Tre'Davious White and Maxwell Hairston compete for the job. You did that during training camp. Hairston bows out with the injury. Tre White does enough to earn the job, but sustains that groin injury leading in to week 1. So I'm not sure a game in which your defense allowed 40 points is going to change Sean McDermott's opinion on who's going to be the starting cornerback too when healthy. It was a good start for Strong, but really that's what it was. It was a good start. He'll get more opportunities and chances to build on what we saw from this past Sunday night. But I think Tre'Davious White has earned the chance to give it another kick at the can. He came here. He won that job after Maxwell Hairston got hurt. He stayed healthy outside of that groin injury that kept him out a few weeks. He should be able to see this through, and I think he'll get the opportunity to do just that. Dorian Strong played 100% of the snaps against the Ravens, and who's to say that that's going to be the exact case with Tre'Davious White? There may be times that we do see Dorian Strong out there in spurts, maybe not as much of a rotation, but maybe a spot player in the rookie, as you saw his use as a coverage man and also in run support, as I mentioned before, that tackle on Derrick Henry. So inspiring stuff from the young player, but he has plenty to offer, and White has some restrictions. But with that being said, I think it's a good problem to have at this point. Hairston 3 weeks away from a return. Put Tre'Davious White into that position that you planned on having him in heading into the regular season. And I just think it's a well-earned role for Tre'Davious White at this point. And something, like I said, he deserves to see through. And let's see what he has come regular season. And if he doesn't have it anymore, pull the trigger and put Strong back out there and wait for Hairston to return from the injured reserve. Either way, McDermott made it seem like it's going to be Tre'Davious White, said that they have a lot of faith in Tre White. And although Dorian Strong did some good things as a youngster, but he did leave the door open. He did say, we'll see. So he didn't say firmly Tre'Davious White is going to get the start week 2 against the New York Jets. But I think they're just taking it slow with Tre'Davious White's recovery from that groin injury and seeing how things play out at least the first few days of practice leading into this game, and seeing if Tre'Davious White can still bounce back from a day of practice at his age and see what Thursday brings before really solidifying that role moving forward. So I think it's going to be Tre White, but there is a little bit of a door left open. It could be Dorian Strong in week 2 against the New York Jets. You'll have to continue to monitor that, and we will as well here on the podcast throughout the course of the week. There was a bit of disappointing injury news to report from Wednesday's practice, as nickel cornerback Taron Johnson missed Wednesday's practice with a quad injury. This is a player who gets banged up a lot. He's a bit undersized and plays really above his size, the way that he throws his body and lays it all on the line, no matter the situation. He'd run head first through a brick wall to make a tackle if he had to, as we saw during the preseason. I think it was against the Chicago Bears. So he may have just needed some maintenance on this quad injury, maybe a couple of days off, and he returns on Thursday or Friday, giving him a chance to play. We'll see. But that would be a pretty big loss for this Bills defense that allowed Baltimore to amass 432 yards and gain 8.6 yards per play in week 1. And that was with Taron Johnson. So if you take a player of his all-pro or former all-pro caliber out of the lineup, it would likely be Cam Lewis filling in. And he's an adequate backup, but he is not to the level or like I said, the caliber of a Taron Johnson. So if Taron Johnson's out with that quad injury, a big loss for the Buffalo Bills against the New York Jets. But I'd like to pause for a moment and remind you to please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Please head on over to the YouTube app, hit that like button. Also share this with your friends. And subscribe to the channel as well. It would really mean a lot to me and really help us spread the word on Buffalo Pregame. But elsewhere on the Bills defense, edge rusher Greg Rousseau was limited in Wednesday's practice. He was one of several players that headed to the medical tent during Sunday's game. It was listed as a knee injury on Wednesday's injury report, and he didn't have anything really reported after the game, I don't think, by Sean McDermott, but oftentimes players really tend to play through these things, and then it takes a day or two coming off the game, and then you really see it pop up on the injury report, I should say, in the days following the game. But finally, linebacker Shaq Thompson did not practice with a hamstring and hand injury. Cornerback Christian Benford got through the game unscathed after dealing with a groin injury going into Sunday's matchup with the Ravens. So that's good news. And then Keon Coleman also, he was dealing with a groin injury last week, and we all saw him ball out on Sunday, and he got through a full practice on Wednesday. So a couple of good signs there. James Cook on the offensive side of the ball has an injured hamstring, and tight end Dawson Knox an injured hip, both limited during Wednesday's practice. Unknown significance of any of these players' injury. We'll learn more as the week progresses in terms of whether or not those two are in jeopardy of missing this week's game. Also, kick returner Brandon Codrington was limited with a knee injury. An interesting note on kick returns in week one. They were up about 50% in terms of their occurrence from a season ago. Over 70% of kickoffs were returned in week one this season, opposed to just over 20% last season in week one. So a huge jump, and that's due to the NFL making the touchback now at the 35-yard line. So that's really enticed teams to leave it returnable for opposing teams, and you see a 50% increase. That is quite incredible. And Codrington performed well in this game. So if you're to be without him, it's likely going to be Ray Davis filtering in at kick returner. Maybe you see Khalil Shakir at punt returner. But Codrington set the Bills up with good field position against the Ravens, particularly on that opening drive leading to the Dalton Kincaid touchdown. Bills had an average starting field position of their own 31-yard line after kick returns, and that includes a penalty that they had on special teams as well. So it would be a significant loss. You kept Codrington as your kick return specialist, and if you're without him against his former team in the New York Jets, that would be something to consider. And Nathan Oliver chimes in. He says, I know head coach McDermott doesn't like playing rookies, but man, Strong looked decent, and he kind of downplayed him for Trey in today's comments for some reason. I don't get it. That's just how Sean McDermott typically deals with rookies in the media. I wouldn't agree with you totally, and I appreciate the comment, and you're welcome to your opinion. I wouldn't agree with you totally that Sean McDermott doesn't play rookies. You've seen him do it in the past. Christian Benford was a rookie starter, and we've seen how his career has turned out, for example. But at the same time, I think he does take it slow, especially in terms of his praise showered on these young players. He doesn't want to get them ahead of themselves and grow too big of a head on their shoulders early in their career. So if there's anything he takes slow, it's certainly the compliments that he showers on these players. So that didn't necessarily surprise me. And he has already expressed his love for Tre White. It's one of the reasons why the Bills brought Tre White back. It's one of the players that Sean McDermott has been most fond of throughout the course of his career as Bills head coach, his first draft pick here in Buffalo. So, I believe that's the case. So, I like I mentioned before, I think Tre White is going to be reinserted as the starter, but I don't know if it'll be a short leash. But Sean McDermott and company, they'll be ready to pull the trigger on Dorian Strong if necessary, as maybe games and weeks go along if things don't land with Tre White at the cornerback 2 position. So that's really it for injuries. It's been a lot to update really every week in terms of the various Bills players dealing with injuries and what their status is. Are they going to play? Are they not going to play? Are they limited? Are they full participation? So that's the update on the injury front. And despite the injuries lining the Bills roster, the Bills were in full pads on Wednesday. And that's kind of a chicken or the egg theory. Did these players, were they too injured to practice in full, or were they listed as limited because the team didn't really want to be too rough on their bodies coming off, as Ed Oliver said earlier today, a 60-minute battle and really throw a physical practice at them right off the bat? So maybe they're holding them back a little bit, trying to be a little bit conservative, and just providing some maintenance to some of these players that wound up on the injury report. But either way, Sean McDermott said before practice that this week's sessions leading up to the Jets game, they're going to be hard on the Bills roster. And really the reasoning for that, he said, was, quote, when you try to prepare in the light of being an elite performer, that elite preparation is hard. So McDermott not taking it easy, and there's no rest for the weary in the Bills coming off that thrilling win over the Baltimore Ravens. And McDermott and his coaching staff obviously not happy with a lot of the elements of the team's performance against Baltimore, particularly the rush defense and really the defense overall. And another physical game coming up against a team who likes to run the football. So maybe he just thought his team needs a little bit more callousing, as the Bills head coach always likes to say. But I'm interested to see if those listed as injured do practice in full by the end of the week, as soon as tomorrow, perhaps, when things get maybe a little bit lighter when it comes to the Bills. And we have a little fan, it's Heath, chiming in. So thanks for that. Nathan Oliver chiming in again on YouTube. Bernard looked bad on Sunday night. Both of the linebackers really struggled, I thought, and it was particularly disappointing for Matt Milano, what you saw from him during training camp. And I know it's just training camp, but you also saw it briefly during that preseason game that he played in. You got really excited about what Matt Milano potentially had to offer this season, and it was just a dud of a performance all in all from the Bills defense. And it all started up front with that defensive line. Once you don't clear the way at the line of scrimmage, it's really hard for the levels behind. So I think you can just kind of forget about this one, move on. But if it happens 2 weeks in a row and this Bills defense allows the New York Jets offense, which moved the ball very well against the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you let them get off in this game, then some concerns start to brew regarding the Bills defensive unit. But 2 new players were at Bills practice on Wednesday. As before we get to that, Dirty Jersey chimes in. The Ravens' change of tempo really hurt them to be able to communicate pre-snap. And yeah, we discussed that on my review episode on Monday on Tuesday. And that was really a matter of, what you're saying there. A great example of that was on Cole Bishop's blitz from the safety position, really in uncommon practice. They're blitzing from about 10 to 15 yards away. And I think Dirty Jersey is hitting the nail on the head here. Just the change of tempo, the quick snaps, and everything that the Ravens were doing really confused the Bills and put them out of their element in that game. We'll see if other teams take note of that and continue to do that moving forward. And Dirty Jersey thinks the other way around. He thinks, I think they'll fix that and it won't be an issue moving forward. I think it hurt the linebackers too. So yeah, we'll see if other teams try to do that against the Bills. And if so, we'll see if the Bills have a better response for that moving forward throughout the course of the season. But 2 new players at Bills practice on Wednesday. New punter Cameron Johnston met in the media, said he messaged Matt Prater, Bills' new kicker, who punched through that 32-yard game-winning field goal against the Ravens. Said he asked him just his impressions of the Bills' locker room, and Prater told him that he himself had only been within that locker room for about 4 days or so. So that was a funny moment caught by WGRZ's Jonathan Acosta during practice. Johnston sustained a season-ending ACL tear last season with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's got a big leg. He's got a career-long punt of 74 yards that he booted in 2023 with the Houston Texans. He also has long punts of 67 yards in 2022, 69 yards in 2021, 66 yards in 2020, 61 yards in 2019, and 68 yards in 2018. His career net punt average, I think, is over 40 yards per punt. So he's got a big leg, and I think that's what the Bills are looking for, and that was what they were most disappointed in Brad Robbins. He had the lowest EPA per punt of any punter in the league in week one. His shortest punt, I think, went 28 or 38 yards, one of the two. Yeah, either way, very, very disappointing. I don't think he had any inside the 20, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, Johnston played with Philadelphia from 2018 to 2020, Houston from 2021 to 2023, and then a couple of games with the Steelers before that season-ending ACL injury last year. And he should be a significant improvement over what we saw from Brad Robbins in week one. I don't know how you can get any worse from what we saw from Brad Robbins. So let's see how we can work with Prater as a holder. That's always something to watch and always something widely discussed in the Bills media sphere, and how the punter can work with the kicker and vice versa. But Matt Prater just got here. Cameron Johnston just got here. Time to move forward with those two and their chemistry before Tyler Bass gets off the injured list, as he is permitted to come off the injured reserve after week 4, but no telling whether or not he's progressing well in his rehab. I don't think Sean McDermott or anybody has been asked about him the past several weeks. So now we go into week 2. Another punter enters the fold, and we've had new punters, new kickers, seemingly every week throughout the course of training camp and the preseason. So this has really been an immense changeover by this unit early in the year. Interested to see how it continues to work out. We did hear from Sean McDermott previously. He discussed how once Tyler Bass is healthy enough, he will return as the team's kicker, and that won't change despite Matt Prater's game winner against the Baltimore Ravens. And Dirty Jersey, once again, he should be better. Robbins been averaging 39 yards a punt for a while. Johnston averages 47 to 49. Yeah, I think it was unfortunate that the injury ended his season last year with the Steelers, and a position like punter, you just kind of have to move on. And I think the Steelers just kind of continued to roll along with what they had last year. And hey, another man's, for lack of a better phrase, another man's trash is, or a man's trash is another man's treasure. However the hell that goes. I don't know. It's late. Not even that late. 7:18 feels later. But along with Johnston practicing with the team for the first time, the Bills signed defensive tackle Phidarian Mathis to the practice squad. He was out there on Wednesday. Mathis is a former second-round pick. He's a one-technique defensive tackle, which is a position the Bills have struggled to lock down in recent years. Not sure how much of a chance he'll be given to earn playing time. The Bills also have Jordan Phillips, Zion Logue on the practice squad. All three of them really big bodies, one or two of which may be in line for an elevation here in the coming weeks, the way we saw the Bills' defensive line perform against the Baltimore Ravens. If things don't get better in a hurry, I wouldn't be surprised if Phillips, Logue, or in this case, Mathis, get the call on an elevation in the weeks to come. And yeah, Nathan Oliver saying in the comments that the Bills should have brought back Zach Davidson to punt. He averaged like 55 yards per punt during the preseason. But hey, I think he'll go with the more established guy in Johnston. And I'm interested in Johnston just for his accent alone. I love myself a good Australian accent, and he whipped it out today with reporters, and it caught me off guard. But very interesting guy. Seems like a good guy to talk to, and hopefully he works out for the Bills on the field. And we'll see what Mathis has to offer down the road as well. But once again, before we conclude this episode, I'd like to pause for a moment and remind you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Please head over to the YouTube app, hit that like button, give us a comment, give us a rating on the audio side, and subscribe to everything you can to get updated episodes throughout the course of the season. Things are only going to get more fast and furious, and anything you can do in terms of a like, a share, a subscription, anything to that effect would really mean a lot. But Josh Allen, AFC Offensive Player of the Week honors, that was announced on Wednesday. He totaled 424 yards, four touchdowns, no turnovers against the Ravens, 251 passing yards, and 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter alone. It's the 16th time he has earned the weekly honor, which extends his franchise record. It's the most AFC Offensive Player of the Week honors earned by a single player since 2018, when Josh Allen entered the league. It's also, like every week, it's also just an incredible stretch that Josh Allen has going here over the past several years, just putting these performances together and setting historic pace for others in the league. You're really seeing him elevate his game to the top of the mountain, and it's been just absolutely a joy to watch. And I think you can safely say that this team waited for years for a quarterback, and now this fan base is the best player in the league to root for on a weekly basis. So Bills fans, you got to consider yourself fortunate. You get to watch the best player each and every week, and you get to watch him do things like he did this past week against the Baltimore Ravens. But a few more bits of news and notes, I should say, leading into the Bills Week 2 matchup with the New York Jets. The Bills Jets officiating crew for Week 2, led by Clete Blakeman, and that name might sound familiar. It's the same man who led the crew during the Bills' AFC Championship game loss, and we all know how the officials impacted that game. Dalton Kincaid's third down stretch ruled short late in the game. Josh Allen with a fourth down stretch also ruled short late in the game. It turns around for a Chiefs score. And then earlier in that game, Xavier Worthy also given a catch on a controversial call, a play that the Bills challenged. So a lot of plays not going the Bills' way in that game. And as Colin B78 on X pointed out earlier, this won't be the same crew from that game as typically during the postseason. They mix up the crews and put the best rated officials out there. So I think there's only like one carryover outside of Blakeman, but at the same time, Blakeman will be wearing the white hat once again, making those decisions and being on the headset with New York when it comes to challenges. So I'm sure that doesn't sit well with Bills fans entering this divisional tilt, as Nathan Oliver chimes in, boo Clete. I'm sure plenty of Bills Mafia shares your sentiment, Nathan. And John Robert, yes, Ed Oliver, just his best game of his career, I think, for Ed Oliver, and something to build on from last year. We heard him talk at the podium today and had a lot to say, which isn't often the case for Ed Oliver. He tried to downplay his performance, but eventually the reporters there got it out of him. Just said that things rolled his way in this game, and he was happy it was him, but he would have been as happy if it was somebody else. And he just said how the Bills defense needs to show improvement, but he focuses more on the positives that you can take away from that performance. In his mind, the Bills really started to solve the Ravens running game, which it did down the stretch of the game. When the Ravens needed to run it and burn time, they averaged about 2.5 yards per carry. So when the rubber came to meet the road, Ed Oliver led the way and helped the running game come up with a couple of big stops. And his words rang true at the podium today. And I liked what Ed Oliver had to say also about his family, talking about his leadership and how fatherhood has really helped him in terms of being more patient and spreading his knowledge on the field. And he said fatherhood and Having kids has a way of maturing you very, very quickly. And I think we're starting to see that from Ed Oliver in terms of his career. But a little bit more news coming out of actually, the only bit of news coming out of Jets camp. They released their former return man, Xavier Gipson, who might be a familiar name to some Bills fans. He returned a punt to beat the Bills during the 2023 season, fumbled in the Jets Week 1 game, and head coach Aaron Glenn said, "You're out of here." That was the reason for his release. He didn't even get to return the final return in that game. So it looks like it's going to be Arian Smith that will take over that role as he took the final return against the Steelers last week. But Xavier Gipson, no longer with the New York Jets, and that overtime punt return to beat the Bills in 2023 was one of the more disappointing losses of this current Bills era, and Xavier Gipson, the reason for that Jets victory. But I think that's going to do it for tonight's episode. I appreciate everybody for chiming in. Like I said, please head on over to the YouTube app or wherever you listen to these podcasts. In terms of the audio side, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. Please help spread the word. I'm going to start ramping up these shows as the days and weeks go on here. So turn notifications on, all that good stuff. And as always, thank you for joining me. We'll see you next time.